Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching The Salty Sea, and I am wishing you all a happy Janksgiving. For those of you outside of the US, Thanksgiving is an American holiday that is far too complicated to explain here. So let's just get into the lists. I have covered competitive content on this channel since 2.0 came out. I have covered narrative content on this channel since 2.0 came out. But what I haven't done, and what needs to be done, is I haven't covered the weird, the just wildness, the beer and pretzels. Like, me and my buddy don't want to think about long narrative campaigns. We don't want to think about caring who's going to win. We want to do the weirdest stuff on the board that we can. And I used to do this in 1.0, and why would we let the tradition die? So here we go. It's the holiday. Here's some weird lists. The first one I'm just calling Blam. Here's the list. So the idea is, here's a Night Judicator. Beautiful model. One that people are always wanting to make work because it has a whopping one shot. And that's not very effective. Let's be real here. And it's pretty expensive too, $235. Now, why would you ever run one? Well, the one shot does 5 and 10. And if you hit that 10, you just feel so pleased with yourself, so happy. And even if you hit a couple 5s in 2 shots, you feel pretty good too. The problem is, with just one shot, you're not doing anything at all. So let's pair it with a high sentinel. Mark a shot, or mark a target, get +1 against it, or have an KO ally, an Arcanaut Admiral, always around, giving you fight for profit, making it so that if you can position that Arcanaut Admiral so that it's covering the Night Judicator, maybe even put the Night Judicator on an objective. This is pretty possible in stuff like ley lines too, where it's really important to have coverage on one objective while you blow people off of other objectives. And your Admiral and your Judicator can do that. And this ability has a reasonable range to it too, where your Admiral could be conceivably covering one objective while your Judicator is on the other objective and still getting the aura. There's a lot you can work with here. Now, so I've put 2 versions here. The first is quote unquote a semi-competitive version, just because Orlan Wardens are all over this version. Wardens are cool. They're one of the only M5 cheap fighters that are still really good. A lot of expensive move 5 and move 6 fighters are still good because you want to be able to deliver the payload of their attacks, right? And I'll talk about some of those expensive move 5 fighters that are good pretty soon. But the Orlan Wardens are really nice. They're really great at covering the board with their 3-inch range, and having 8 of them here is really nice. And so they're just going to be able to do all the little jobs for you while you just focus on your sweet jank combos with the Night Judicator. This is pretty easy to pull apart for opponents who want to kind of just spike the high sentinel, stuff like that. But honestly, it's going to take a really prepared opponent to embarrass you with this list. Now, let's go into a true combo version, a pretty wild sort of version. The Blade Lord was probably the best unit in Poor Lumineth in first edition. It got way worse in second, although it did get a point of reach, which is nice. It has 3 pretty high impact attacks, and Dawn Riders are really good at chasing down whatever the high sentinel marks as its +1 attack target. Again, Dawn Riders, not the most points efficient, they have that Mount Rune mark where you don't really want to have more than one of them in a competitive list. But they work really well with some of the combos here, as far as making this +1, sometimes +2 attack aura, giving the +1 target with the high sentinel. Dawn Riders being able to chase that down is really nice. Of course, you have the Blade Lord, who really needs +1 attack all the time to be effective in that glass cannon role. Otherwise, they're really kind of a liability, where it's just so easy for so many elite fighters to just knock them down in one hit, and then you've lost 110 points worth of stuff, which hurts just so much more than, if you had a 70-point model that sort of had the same wounds. So that all makes this a little fragile, but the highs are going to be so high here with your ability, again, to pump up this Night Judicator, just send absolute bazookas at your opponent, go from doing 2 per round to doing 4 per round, or sometimes even, what is it? You would potentially do 8 per round if it's being covered by the Arcanaut and the High Sentinel. That's going to be pretty difficult to achieve, and 8 is kind of pointless. 8 shots with the Night Judicator is going to obliterate anything it shoots by the time you've rolled 6 dice, much less 8. But it can be done, and that's pretty sweet, and I really want someone to put this on the table. Let's get into some of the other crazy things you can do. I am really into Stormfiends. Now, a lot of folks have kind of talked about Skaven, where the old 1.0 builds are in a kind of a tough spot, except that the center combo of 1.0 that was so good in Skaven, the Rat Ogre plus the Packmaster, that's still kind of together, right? All that kind of overshadows the thing that I really like about Skaven, which is Stormfiends. Stormfiends have gotten a lot better in 1.0, despite being fast, right? They're move 5, but they're still really solid. Stormfiends with rattling cannons especially are really interesting for their abilities to bracket monsters from range, and then if the monster decides to close in on them, they bracket the monster from close up too. That's really nice to have. They can also just machine gun chaff off the board. Just one of those few things where you pay a ton of points, but you really have the potential to get it back over the course of the round. So I'm really excited about triple Stormfiend lists. I've got one that's not quite fully painted up, but I'm painting it up as we speak. I'm really excited about it. The first list, a Warlock Engineer, 2 of the Rattling Cannons, a Doomflayer Gauntlets, and a Warpfire Thrower. Warpfire Throwers are little archers. Most little archers got nerfed in a pretty brutal way, to be honest. But Warpfire Throwers are still somewhat functional and pretty interesting. This version in general is just very shooty. A lot of these jank lists that I've got here today are pretty shooty, and that's because shooting was nerfed pretty hard in this edition, and I've heard a lot of people talking about how you just can't attack from range anymore at all. And so I'm wanting to kind of throw some fun ideas to get people started, to get people, trying to bring out their archers again. And here's one of them. Now, it's important for these lists to be accessible, right? Nobody's going to go buy 4 boxes on a meme. So here's a version with no conversions on the Stormfiend. You can just do a Stormfiend with Warpfire projectors, a Stormfiend with Doomflayer gauntlets, a Stormfiend with Grinder fists, and then 1 Plague Monk. This is actually the one that I've got, that my triple Stormfiend list that I'm painting up right now. I'm really excited about it. The Doomflayer gauntlets and the Grinder fists are not arguably, they are the 2 best Stormfiends. The Doomflayer gauntlets is best in most situations, but the Grinder fists, actually, when using abilities, are just a little bit more efficient against monsters specifically. So those are kind of the 2 that you want. As far as the melee Stormfiends, the Shock Gauntlets one, they're not trash by any means, but they're just not quite as good as the other 2 melee Stormfiends. Overall, I can't wait to use my Storm family in a game. I promise I will mention it on the channel when it finally happens. And for anyone else who's got some Skaven, I encourage you to try this out. I think it'd be pretty crazy. All right, let's get into Graywater Fastness. Now, everyone I hear talk about Tempest's Eye is, wow, what a Freudian slip. I'm not even going to cut that. Everyone I hear talk about Cities of Sigmar goes straight to Tempest's Eye, and for good reason. Swift as the Wind is probably one of the 5 or 10 best abilities in the entire game, probably closer to top 5 best abilities in the entire game. It's amazing. But there's more to Cities of Sigmar than just Tempest's Eye if you're playing with ideas of not just purely to win, right? And you can still get some wins in. So here's a list that kind of uses some synergies, some of the stuff that Graywater Fastness is doing. The first being that the Sharpshooter with Grenade Launching Blunderbuss moves 10, gets a really solid little use. It's the most sort of damage average of all of the range shooters combined with kind of the ability to cover the board. So you can run around with that move 10 on his little horse and then shoot twice using just a double in the first round. And that's really nice. If you want this in narrative, by the way, it's very doable. There's an item, or is it a trait, that order fighters are able to use to make sure that they always come in round one. So if you have Graywater Fastness and you're worried about that 1/3 of times when your leader won't be on in round one, you can deal with that in narrative. Then, because we're, classically Graywater Fastness is not all dwarves, but mostly dwarves, we've got just a little core of small dwarven melee units. The Hammerer, the two Longbeards, they're very solid point for point. They're very points efficient. Then we're going with two Iron Drakes, just little archers. Again, in the first round, you can get a lot of doubles sometimes. Use them on your Iron Drakes. The Aether Chemist is interesting. It's the most likely to get a benefit from the Graywater Fastness triple. Now, you need a Rune Lord to get that. I haven't put a Rune Lord in this list, but you could easily switch out the Lord Imperatant for a Rune Lord and then some other good stuff. Some other fun stuff, maybe more of these dwarves, for example, if you don't have a Lord Imperatant. And the Aether Chemist is really nice there. It's also just generally just a nice little shooter. And the KO triple, being able to add, again, to range shots as well, is important when you're running around with this 10-inch massive damage sharpshooter and these two little Iron Drakes, right? So that's a nice little combo. Lord Imperatant in general just gives free shots or moves with that triple. That's going to be really nice because you don't have Swift as the Wind. You want ways to get more activations to get these dwarves either moving around or shooting around. And the Lord Imperatant is really good there. That's a fighter who, I think there was a lot of hype for it when 2.0 came out. There's just generally been hype. That ability where you get a free move or a free action for everyone around the Lord Imperatant is so exciting. I think it's a little bit of a trap in competitive play because it's almost impossible to get to 7 fighters in your Thunderstrike list when you have a Lord Imperatant there. And so it just isn't quite doing what Thunderstrike wants to be doing on the board. It's not bad by any means, though, is the thing. So Lord Imperatant becomes a really good ally. And so I was excited to kind of put it into this list and show kind of what you can do with it. That's a little boozier than I would like. All right, so the dankest hold. Moonclan Boss, Dankhold Troggoth, 3 Rockgut Troggoth. See, it's too boozy a beer. Come on, guys. Nettas, just 1. That's all we have room for. That's it. There's some rumors I've heard of similar lists floating around. I've seen one from Oslo, Norway. I've seen some battle reports of one in Michigan. Let's just say it. The dankitude of this list is unstoppable. I've made complaints about the new list building rules in Warcry 2.0, but when used at their best, when used in the most good faith, in the way to make the coolest games, they can do amazing things. And so let's talk about this Gloomspite Gitz list. This is my version. The other versions floating around are slightly different, but what I would do is a Moonclan Boss, a Dankhold Troggoth, these 3 Rockguts, this Netter. I know I've already said that, but it's just so beautiful. It's just a couple Gobos following these 4 giant Troggoths around. You can even do this with not too many boxes. If you convert up that Moonclan Boss from your Netta list or something like that, if you grab the Gloomspite Gitz the little warband, the Shadespire warband, that can work really well. And these Dankhold and Rockguth Troggoth sculpts that are pretty new are just incredibly beautiful. You can paint them in a lot of really thematic ways. I don't love the way Games Workshop has done it, but I've seen some online that are incredible, and I love the 2D art they've commissioned for it. I've got this incredible Troggoth 2D art over here on the side. I think if someone were to paint their Troggoths like that, it would just look amazing. So this is kind of the epitome of what you can do when you're using the new list building rules in a way that's thematic and cool. And I really hope someone tries this out. Well, I don't have to hope. I know that at least 2 people have tried this out, but I hope lots of people try this out. This is some of the coolest stuff. This is what Warcry is all about. Now, here's a preview on a video that I'm going to be doing later during the winter, probably not even in December, sometime in January, but I will be covering the best one-box warbands in the game. And here's one of them to get you started. Just 1 box of Zangors. That's it. Before, you actually couldn't count up to 1,000 with them, but now you can. 280, I just have Twist Bray here. It's actually 2 Twist Brays, which is fine. The box lets you build 1 per every 5, which is great. So you can get 2 Twist Brays out of a box. You can also get up to 4 Zangors with Great Blade out of a box. But we're only going to have 3 here. I don't know why I don't know why. There's plenty of typos on this page. We'll fix the list in post, but then you'll have 2 Zangor mutants, 3 Zangors with paired blades, and that adds up to 990 points, which is great. It's so close to just the perfect 1-box warband. It's amazing. You can also convert up a 3rd mutant. Just know that the box only comes with 2, and the mutant head, it's just 1 mutant head, so even having 2 just feels kind of weird. I built my box with 2 just recently. I kind of tripped, fell, and ended up with Arcane Cataclysm. I'm super excited about it. I'm going to start some Lumineth. I've been building these little archers. But I'm also going to play Tzeentch more unironically than I will the Lumineth. So I'm pretty excited about them. This is, though, just out of 10 Zangors, just 1 cheap box, one of the best ones you can do. There's only 2 weak fighters in this whole warband, and that's the 2 Twist Brays. Everything else is really good. You have move 5, 15 wounds each. Most fast warbands, they're glass cannons, and that's the problem with them, is they run to where they're going, they smack something. They don't quite kill it, right, because they're only getting 1 attack. And then it smacks them back, but it gets to attack twice. They die. They don't get to get that 2 and 3. And that's no good, right? But when you have 15 wounds, you can actually take hits, and then you can sort of wait into next round. You can kind of create yourself good engagements where, you know, you outnumber your foe on the 1 fight that matters, and then the 15 wounds let you kind of keep rolling and keep getting more attacks in. Zangors are great, is what I'm trying to say, in a way that is sort of systematically different than the average move 5 fighter in the game. It's a really beautiful profile that I suggest people give a try, and I'm very excited to give it a try myself. So I just want to thank my patrons. Here's the list of you. I love you all. I couldn't do sort of weird and wild videos like this without you. In 1.0, I did sort of 3 or 4 of these sort of holiday jank list videos, and they were consistently among my least watched videos because, you know, people gravitate to the more formal ways to play the game, right? Like specific narrative plans or competitive advice. And that makes a ton of sense, and I have no problem with that, and I love doing those types of videos. But it's fun to relax every once in a while, and you guys make it possible. A few of my patrons told me over Discord that they would be interested in this kind of thing, so that's why you're seeing it. Warcry just has so much room for cool stuff, to just do stuff that's fun and chuck dice, and I just want to celebrate that. I'm going to be doing another one of these on Janksmith's Eve, and it's going to be entirely based on patron list suggestions. I might sneak one in there, but for the most part, it's going to be only lists that came from my patrons, because I just want to celebrate all of you guys, because you're all so amazing. So until then, may all your rolls be crits.